So we're going to start out with Ted Rao and Jerry Koch-Gonzalez, and they're going to share a little bit about the Sociocracy model. Take it away.
Thank you, Renee. Yes, and when I love what you said earlier. When I think of Sociocracy, gathered group, discerning, love at its core. That's kind of how I understand Sociocracy. I'm going to do we're going to go through a slide deck, and then after that we'll have the congregations talking about their experience, and then we'll have question and answer period of time. So I'll go right to the slide deck that I've got here. Sociocracy, let's see, right? Ocracy, governance, socio, the socios. So governance by those who associate together or those who work together, those who worship together. And their sociocracy has three kind of core elements. One is decision-making by consent. Another is organizational structure through the linked circles. And the third is continuous evolution through feedback. And there's ways in which there's practices that bind all of these together. The underlying principles being we want to be effective and we want to be egalitarian. We want to be able to hold both of those. Then all of this, as you can imagine, this is like a steering wheel because governance is about steering your organization towards achieving its aims. And these are the core elements that help us steer towards achieving our aim. Mixed in with all these different core elements are the various practices like selection for roles by consent, the meetings, the performance reviews that we do for people in roles, interpersonal feedback, writing proposals together, workflows. These are all kind of bits and pieces of what holds the whole of steering towards the aim. We'll explain some of these things a little bit in the session today, but some of those you'll just find out more over time. So a little bit about the history, and I liked what Renee said. We don't really know the whole history of indigenous ways. Often we're in circle, everyone speaking, sense of equality. We don't know exactly how that influenced the early history of sociocracy, but we're pretty sure that it did. The earliest mentions of sociocracy comes from a French philosopher named Auguste Comte, and he didn't actually coin the word, but he put it into use. And in that era, many philosophers were influenced by indigenous thinking, particularly from the Northwest indigenous populations in the United States, what is now the United States. Then the sociocracy idea continued with a sociologist named Lester Ward, but it didn't really start becoming what it is until Kes Burke and Betty Cadbury implemented consent decision-making in their werkplaats, the children's school in the Netherlands. And in that school in the Netherlands, a man named Gerard Endenburg, he went there, grew up, became an electrical engineer, and instituted what we now know as sociocracy in an electronics company, and from there branched out into spreading the ideas of sociocracy through training and education, and that's kind of where we start coming in. John Buck and Sharon Valines in 2007 wrote We the People. That was kind of the first book bringing sociocracy to English-speaking world. And that's about the time when Sociocracy for All begins. So, and sociocracy has spread not only in congregations, but in communities, co-ops, nonprofits, businesses, neighborhoods, etc. So Ted, on to you.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Ted, and I'm going to speak a little bit about the history, and Jerry, you can just advance it all off that slide. So because I'm not going to go deeply into it, I just want you to get a sense of what we care about in Sociocracy for All. You can see we started in 2016. You actually have here the two founders, which is rare these these days that we're doing events together. And we started doing training, especially immersion training. And then people wanted to join. They said, this is cool. How can we do this? Can we join? So we then became a membership organization in Sociocracy for All, started doing advanced training, writing books, translating books, and so on. We'll talk about that at the end. And now we're about 200 people worldwide in several languages and in about 50 circles or so, but that changes all the time, which I hope we get to talk about why these things change. And you can advance. Thank you. And one of the principles in that steering wheel that Jerry showed was decision-making by consent. And I want to just highlight a few pieces about consent that I find important. And then Jerry will talk a little bit about the structure and also show how the structure can be adapted or can be used in the context that we're here for today. So consent decision-making is where the everybody in a circle comes in. So here we see what would be 5 people in this particular example. And whenever they would have a proposal and they want to approve this proposal by consent together with them, and Jerry, you can advance, then they would pass this proposal whenever everybody consents to it. So each person in the circle needs to give consent so that it is consent. If one of them says no, then that means this objection needs to be looked at further so that we can figure out together as a group what could be improved. And the next slide. What's interesting about it is that the question that we ask is slightly different from what many of us know as consensus, because sometimes it's not consistently so, but often the question for consensus is, do you think this is a good idea, or do you think this is what we should do, or do you agree, or do you like the proposal? And in sociocracy and consent decision-making, the question is slightly different. It is, do you think this will work? Do you think this will further, or will it further the aim, or will it keep us from doing what we thought we would do, which is the aim? So will it inhibit, or will it further the aim? And there you see here where the heart is. That would be the group of people in any given group that would say, I love this proposal. It's great. It's perfect. It's exactly what I want. And those are the people that in consensus decision-making would say yes. And then there are the people, you can see that with that icon of the like in the lighter green, no, actually the other one, lighter green, thank you. And those are the people that might maybe not say this proposal is my number one or my favorite, what I would have chosen, but they might say, yeah, fine, this is also going to work. It's also going to further our aim, or at least not harm it. It's like, yeah, we can do this. And that is the key group of people that we include in the yes and consent decision-making, because decision-making by consent means there can't be any objection, right? So if there's an objection, we have no consent, we need to work a little harder to listen more and figure out what to do. But it's enough if there's simply no objection. Not everybody needs to come to a place that they are now saying this is the best proposal ever written. So you see here on the right, that's why we have this difference here between this works or this doesn't work. Whether it's your preference is actually not as important, because that helps groups adopt a proposal and bring something into action more easily, so that then we're in the same boat and learn what this proposal brought us and whether it enhanced what we're trying to do or not. And then we can adjust it together, because none of us can predict the future. So it helps us try something out. And you see with that broken gear icon there, an objection really means, no, hold on, if we approve this proposal, then the thing that we're trying to do together can't be done anymore. For example, we're going to be too busy, or somebody's going to get hurt, or this is not safe, this is too expensive. All those reasons are very good reasons to object. And we would want to hear them because they help us prevent us from making mistakes. Now you can advance. And one thing that I really appreciate about consent as well is that it helps us. There's a step-by-step process to it, which helps us in a group to think together at the same pace. So whenever we make a decision, we always make sure that we have a time to ask and answer questions. And that's where you would need to click, Jerry. So we want to make sure that people understand the proposal. And then the next step, we do one round of making sure that everybody can give a reaction to the proposal. And there we have it. And then in the last step, we make sure that everybody either consents or objects. And then if there's an objection, again, we work some more harder. And what you see in the front and top right here is what we would call a round. That's that soccer practice, right? Talking one by one and actually listening when somebody speaks instead of being at the edge of your seat, waiting till that person takes a breath so you can, get in and prove them wrong. That's not what happens in sociocracy because of rounds that keep a certain order of what we do in what order and who speaks when, so that everybody can relax and knows what's happening and is really working together. And over to you, Jerry.
Okay. The central idea for Gerard Endenburg was no one ignored. Every voice matters. So when you have a round, you know that every voice matters. If you do consensus without clarity of rounds, then the people who speak the most often their voices seem to matter more. When you do majority rule, the people who've got the majority, their voices matter and the minority doesn't. So I'm going to turn to organizational structure. So here's the kind of the basic structure, and this is ordinary. This is kind of like any organization. You might have a board, you have a management team or a coordinating circle, and then you have several departments and sub-departments and sub-sub-departments. That's kind of standard structure. What's different with sociocracy is that we link those circles with two people, the leader and the delegate, who are chosen by consent by either the parent group or the child group here. So the selection process is by consent of your leadership, rather than appointed or majority rule, etc. And so the information flows all the way through all the circles because of this double linking. So within each circle, decisions making by consent, and within the organization as a whole, everyone is linked together and the information can flow. There is, it gets interesting when we think about the top circle or the board of directors, or we often call mission circle. How are those going to be organized? In the context of Unitarians, there may be typical that the membership is electing the board. In the context of nonprofits, more often it's members of the board self-perpetuating, selecting, the next round or the next members of the board. So there's ways to do either one of those. We won't go into detail now, but want to bring this next piece is what's interesting is that when you have a minister and you have lay leadership, in a sense, you have two sources of power. If they work well together, fabulous. If they don't work well together, it's awful. And if the lay leadership is an argument with itself, that's hard. So what we look at with sociocracy is kind of unify the power structure. Everybody has power in a linked way. And so the minister is not set apart, but is one of the members of the mission circle or the board, is one of the members of the coordinating group, and may have some other roles in the organization, like perhaps leading the ministry or however you would call that. Here is just one visualization of structure. Again, mission circle, coordinating circle, and maybe you have program with religious education, social action, environmental action, ministry, worship, and administrative kinds of things. But this is not a static process, and your own particular congregation probably has a different, would come up with a different look than what you see here. And you can keep adding, there may be a subset of social action is refugee work, and a subset of ministry might be pastoral care, and it might be a choir, etc. So you keep developing your circles as fits your particular organization. And Ted, you want to continue here?
Sure, there are books. Many Voices, One Song is the first book. It's basically the handbook, and I know many people use it as kind of a reference handbook for sociocracy. The second one is Who Decides, Who Decides. is about how do you start when there's nobody to consent to something because the organization hasn't formed yet. Then how do you do it? Who decides that you're going to be making decisions by consent? Like, how do you even get the first set of people started? And this is a step-by-step guide for that. And then let's decide together, written by a colleague of ours, Hope, who has a lot of experience with using this with children. So this is her guide on how to do that.
I think that's the last. Stop share there. You know, one of the interesting things just being here is that we, Ted and I, both live in a co-housing community, and we're aware that there's a way disproportionate number of Unitarians in co-housing communities, you know, around the United States and Canada, and probably some of you here belong to some of those. Some co-housing communities have been started by Unitarian groups, you know, offshoots of a particular congregation. So glad to be here, and then we're ready to talk with congregations. Right?
Great, thank you both. That was an awesome